Hello everyone, and welcome to DM Tools with MaxMcCool. On today's episode of Monsters Manifested, we're looking at the Aboleth. Pretty big description, pretty legendary character, or creature type if you would. So strap yourselves in, because it's gonna be a hefty one. Alright, so the Aboleth can be found on pages 13 and 14 of the Monster Manual. And really, the Aboleth needs no introduction, but that's not the point of this show. So let's introduce the Aboleth. All right. Before the coming of the gods, Aboleths lurked in primordial oceans and underground lakes. They reached out with their minds and seized control of the burgeoning life forms of the mortal realm, making those creatures their slaves. Their dominance made them like gods. Then the true gods appeared, smashing the Aboleth's empire and freeing their slaves. Aboleths have never forgotten. Alright, so that's pretty hefty right there. It's a nice synopsis of their history. They're effectively like ancient quasi-primordial beings almost, right? If they've been around since before the gods appeared and kind of brought order to the chaos that is the material plane, right? There's already a lot of stuff there that we could use to incorporate in an adventure. Excuse me, that utilizes an Aboleth as the spotlight monster, let's call it, to to give your party a hard time. Anyway, let's go on. Eternal memories. Aboleths have flawless memories. They pass on their knowledge and experience from generation to generation. Thus, the injury of their defeat by the gods remains perfectly preserved in their minds. Aboleth's minds are treasure troves of ancient lore, recalling moments from prehistory with perfect clarity. They plot patiently and intricately across eons. Few creatures can conceive of the extent of an Aboleth's plan. Very cool. That right there, that's another very good asset to know about Aboleths. Because right now you already have effectively the knowledge here as a DM that you have ancient creatures that are almost primordial. They like to dominate. They like to seize control of life forms and enslave them, like a high grade mind flayer almost type thing, like an illithid type. And on top of that, they never forget, and they hate the gods. So that would be pretty good fuel or fodder to use against any form of class that worships a god, right? Even a warlock that worships like a great old one, paladins or clerics, clearly. But either way, let's continue. We'll save that for later on down the line. Gods in the lake. Aboleths dwell in watery environments, including ocean abysses, deep lakes, and the elemental plane of water. In these domains and the lands that adjoin them, Aboleths are like gods, demanding worship and obedience from their subjects. When they consume other creatures, Aboleths add the knowledge and experiences of their prey to their eternal memories. Wow. Okay, that's pretty sick, man. That's really, really cool. Because they can, not only do they have this eternal knowledge that they receive from their ancestors that's kind of carried on throughout the generations, they can also consume and therefore learn of all of the knowledge and experiences and wisdoms of effectively their victims and or their meals, because they have to consume other creatures in order to achieve this, but still. All right. Aboleths use their telepathic powers to read the minds of creatures and know their desires. An Aboleth uses this knowledge to gain a creature's loyalty, promising to fulfill such wants in exchange for obedience. Within its lair, the Aboleth can further use its powers to override senses, granting creatures such as its followers the illusion of promised rewards. Alright, so they're super intelligent. On top of that, they're telepathic creatures. They can create these kind of hazy illusions and stuff of that nature in order to further incentivize their subordinates or subjects to cater to their whims effectively, to carry out their wishes, their desires, their goals. Enemies of the gods. The Aboleth's fall from power is written in stark clarity on their flawless memories, for aboleths never truly die. If an aboleth's body is destroyed, its spirit returns to the elemental plane of water, where a new body coalesces for it over days or months. Ultimately, aboleths dream of overthrowing the gods and regaining control of the world. Aboleths have had untold eons to plot and prepare their plans for perfect execution. That's really interesting as well. Okay, so basically you have these ancient primordial creatures that are highly intelligent, highly dominating, or with a thirst for domination. They typically have subjects, as that's been kind of repeated consistently throughout this little description block. And then on top of that, you have they have a hatred for the gods, and they are clearly strategic and like to strategize, so they're not idiots, which I'm sure we will see when we get to their stat block. And on top of that, they're effectively immortal, which is very interesting. Personally, I always knew of aboleths as being kind of these legendary monsters in Dungeons and Dragons, but in all honesty, I've never managed to create a scenario yet, or an encounter yet, or adventure that involves an aboleth, because it kind of it didn't work out with the flow of the campaign I was running for my party. So it hasn't come up yet, but this is already firing off some synapses in my brain on how I could use this. But either way, let's carry on. Aboleths being a legendary creature now, they have layers, therefore they probably have layer actions and layer abilities, and another great tool that a DM can use when incorporating a creature of this nature to an adventure, because Wizards effectively gives you the bog standard, if you would, effects and results of having exposure to an aboleth and their effect on a region, similar to that of like beholders or dragons and stuff like that, which we'll get to once we hit B and D respectively in the monster manual. Anyways, an aboleth's lair. Aboleth's lair in subterranean lakes or the rocky depths of the ocean, often surrounded by the ruins of an ancient fallen aboleth city. An aboleth spends most of its existence underwater, surfacing occasionally to treat with visitors or deranged worshippers. Now on to the lair actions. When fighting inside its lair, an aboleth can invoke the ambient magic to take lair actions. On initiative count 20, losing initiative ties, the aboleth takes a lair action to cause one of the following effects. The aboleth casts Phantasmal Force, with no components required, on any number of creatures it can see within 60 feet of it. While maintaining concentration on this effect, the aboleth can't take other layer actions. If a target succeeds on the saving throw, or if the effect ends for it, the target is immune to the aboleth's Phantasmal Force layer action for the next 24 hours, although such a creature can choose to be affected. Second, pools of water within 90 feet of the aboleth surge outward in a grasping tide. Any creature on the ground within 20 feet of such a pool must succeed on a DC 14 strength saving throw, or be pulled up to 20 feet into the water and knocked prone. The aboleth can't use this layer action again until it has used a different one. And finally, water in the aboleth's lair magically becomes a conduit for the creature's rage. The aboleth can target any number of creatures it can see in such water within 90 feet of it. A target must succeed on a DC 14 Wisdom saving throw, or take 7 average 2d6 psychic damage. The aboleth can't use this layer action again until it has used a different one. Very, very cool. So this already suggests that you have to, or not have to, but you would prefer to clearly and obviously have an aboleth residing within a body of water to allow them, one, to have a layer. If you're to use them as a big boss or big bad evil guy for your adventure campaign, you'd want them residing within a body of water. And clearly all of these actions, including Phantasmal Force, actually, because of how it can be manipulated, or how it can be used to manipulate the minds of the party members, you can use that to have the aboleth effectively strategize on pulling in your party members into that body of water where they're on its terrain now, and can it can have the upper hand. But going on further to the more flavor stuff, the more fluff rather than crunch, regional effects. The region containing an Aboleth's lair is warped by the creature's presence, which creates one or more of the following effects. 1. Underground surfaces within 1 mile of the Aboleth's lair are slimy and wet and are difficult terrain. 2. Water sources within 1 mile of the lair are supernaturally fouled. Enemies of the Aboleth that drink such water vomit it within minutes. 3. As an action, the Aboleth can create an illusory image of itself within 1 mile of the lair. The copy can appear at any location the Aboleth has seen before, or in any location a creature charmed by the Aboleth can currently see. Once created, the image lasts for as long as the Aboleth maintains concentration, as if concentrating on a spell. Although the image is intangible, it looks, sounds, and can move like the Aboleth. The Aboleth can sense, speak, and use telepathy from the image's position as if present at that position. If the image takes any damage, it disappears. If the Aboleth dies, the first 2 effects fade over the course of 3d10 days. So up to a month, basically, up to 30 days, there can be these residual regional effects. Okay. Now let's check out this stat block. Stat block is on page 13 of the Monster Manual. Descriptive information, which I just read off to you folks, is page 14. As you know, it's a big legendary creature. It takes up 2 pages of this book. All right. Let's get into it. Aboleth is a large aberration, lawful evil. Armor class of 17 of natural armor. It's pretty high up for natural armor, but makes sense. Hit points of an average of 135 with 18d10, plus 36 being the roll on it. It has a speed of 10 feet on Earth or on the ground, swim speed of 40 feet. All right, now here comes the scary stuff. Strength score of 21, dexterity score of 9, so not very dexterous, a constitution score of 15, an intelligence score of 18, wisdom score of 15, and a charisma score of 18. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So they're crazy strong, clearly. They're not too hefty in the way of constitution, so it's not like they're meat shields, but they're highly intelligent and charismatic. I'm honestly quite surprised that their wisdom doesn't match up or come close to the intelligence score, due to the fact that they have kind of this mental archive of knowledge and wisdom and information kind of passed down by their ancestors, right? I guess maybe they lean it more towards the intelligence aspect, though I would say that, millennia worth of knowledge and information would be indicative of some wisdom, especially if they can consume enemies and absorb and then retain the knowledge that said enemies had. That's levels of wisdom that other creatures have that they would have inherited, unless I don't know. I'm not wizards. What am I saying? Let's continue. I'm babbling. It has saving throws, specifically con plus 6, int plus 8, and whiz plus 6. So it's pretty solid on those 3 fronts, which makes sense. I'm surprised that it doesn't have a strength saving throw though, since I guess because strength is already so high up, chances are it doesn't necessarily need proficiency to. It doesn't necessarily need proficiency in order to succeed. It's already a plus 5 at 21. Its skills are history plus 12 and perception plus 10. By the gods. The senses that an Aboleth has are dark vision at 120 feet with a passive perception at 20. Languages it speaks are deep speech and telepathy at 120 feet. It's a challenge rating of 10. It's a hefty boy. It's a big baddie. So you're looking, based on the system, the challenge rating system, you need 4 players at level 10 to be able to take out an Aboleth, if the Aboleth is the only enemy that they have to take out. That's it's pretty awesome. Pretty crazy. And it's a good baddie to use. All right, let's see what skills it's got here. Amphibious. The Aboleth can breathe air and water. Makes sense. Mucus cloud. While underwater, the Aboleth is surrounded by a transformative mucus. A creature that touches the Aboleth or that hits it with a melee attack while within 5 feet of it must make a DC 14 Constitution saving throw. On a failure, the creature is diseased for 1d4 hours. The diseased creature can breathe only underwater. Oh, that's awesome. I could see how that would lead to, like, some pretty hilarious instances where now all of a sudden one of your adventurers is forced to wear a fishbowl on their head as they go about doing the rest of their questing. That'd be amazing. Next up, probing telepathy. If a creature communicates telepathically with the Aboleth learns the creature's greatest desires if the Aboleth can see the creature. Oh, that's interesting. So I wonder if that... Well, yeah, so if there's communication, so if the Aboleth communicates telepathically and then an individual reciprocates, that Aboleth has suddenly learned some pretty serious, significant information of the other individual. All right, moving on to actions. Multi-attack. The Aboleth makes 3 tentacle attacks. Tentacle attack is a melee weapon attack with a +9 to hit, a reach of 10 feet, and it hits 1 target at a time. Whew! Hits for 12 average or 2d6 plus 5 bludgeoning damage. If the target is a creature, it must succeed on a DC 14 Constitution saving throw or become diseased. The disease has no effect for 1 minute and can be removed by any magic that cures disease, like restoration and stuff. After 1 minute, the diseased creature's skin becomes translucent and slimy. The creature can't regain hit points unless it is underwater, and the disease can be removed only by heal or another disease-curing spell of 6th level or higher. When the creature is outside a body of water, it takes 6 average or 1d12 acid damage every 10 minutes, unless moisture is applied to the skin before 10 minutes have passed. Oh, that could turn out to be pretty gnarly. Tail is a melee weapon attack with a +9 to hit, a reach of 10 feet on 1 target. The hit is average 15 or 3d6 plus 5 bludgeoning damage. These Aboleths can cause some destruction. Goodness. All right, next up is enslave. Thrice a day, not once, not twice, but thrice a day. The Aboleth targets 1 creature it can see within 30 feet of it. The target must succeed on a DC 14 wisdom saving throw or be magically charmed by the Aboleth until the Aboleth dies or until it is on a different plane of existence from the target. The charmed target is under the Aboleth's control and can't take reactions, and the Aboleth and the target can communicate telepathically with each other over any distance. Whenever the charmed target takes damage, the target can repeat the saving throw. On a success, the effect ends. No more than once every 24 hours, the target can also repeat the saving throw when it is at least 1 mile away from the Aboleth. Now, onto the legendary actions. The Aboleth can take 3 legendary actions, choosing from the options below. Only 1 legendary action can be used at a time, and only at the end of another creature's turn. The Aboleth regains spent legendary actions at the start of its turn. Legendary action the first is detect. The Aboleth makes a wisdom perception check. Tail swipe. The Aboleth makes 1 tail attack, and psychic drain, which costs 2 actions to enact. 1 creature charmed by the Aboleth takes average 10 or 3d6 psychic damage, and the Aboleth regains hit points equal to the damage the creature takes. Whew. All right, that's hefty. That's a lot of information. So I can already, like I said, I have synapses firing off in my brain. I can already see how we could use certain aspects that we've pulled here from the lore of an Aboleth and create a pretty interesting adventure. I mean, ultimately, you could create a whole campaign that kind of revolves around an Aboleth being the big bad evil guy, or at least the first one, right? If your goal is to have a campaign that goes from level 1 to 20, at the halfway mark at level 10, the big bad evil guy right there, an Aboleth would make a pretty solid contender, right? Anyway, moving on though. Let's see what we can make here. So you have an Aboleth that is a creature who is effectively immortal, is infinitely old, has perfect memory, not only of its existence, but the existence of all its predecessors, and of all of the creatures that it's consumed. So you're talking highly, highly intelligent. It hates the gods of the material plane, and it seems to like to bunker down and have a lair, right? It seems to enjoy having individuals do its bidding for it rather than go out and do it itself, unless it's in a body of water or the elemental plane of water, which is understandable. So I can already see instances of an adventure, let's say for example, assuming your players are at level 10 now, right? I mean, you could use something like this all the way from start to finish, right? Depending on how you want to go about it, especially based upon the effects, the regional effects of that are induced by having an Aboleth around, right? But immediately I could see your players making their way to a town or village, even a city, for example. And as they get there, there are a couple things going on. Maybe there has been a streak, or maybe not even a streak. Maybe it's just kind of the legend, the mythos of the village or of the town that every so often some people go missing. Maybe every 3 years, every 5 years, every 10 years, right? Randomly, individuals of this town will go missing, and nobody knows where they go. Nobody can find them. Nobody can discover them. There's never a body found. They just disappear. While that's happening, you could also implement something where perhaps there's this town is not too far off from a cave system, or maybe a mining operation has occurred. Like there's the king or the queen or the lord or the emperor or empress or maybe the guilds, right? Maybe the tradesmen or craftsmen guilds have bought up a piece of land, and they've decided to quarry a patch of land for some stone or some ore or clay or what have you. And in doing that, they've broken down a rock wall that has a chamber, a cavern in it. And this happened, let's say, about a month ago, using the regional effects of the Aboleth and its lair in reverse, right? As the effects fade over the course of up to 30 days, let's say it can take about 30 days for the perversion of the region to occur, right? So, as I was saying, so you have some force or organization or powerful individual has decided, let's say, to quarry some resource in the region. In doing so, they have revealed an opening, a quarry space that has opened up, and basically since then, most operations have stopped. It's been about a month due to the fact that nowadays it's effectively inaccessible to venture further into the cavern, right? The walls, the ceiling, the floor of the cavern are slimy, they're wet. It's just too hard to navigate and traverse for your typical miner, miner, and they can't really get through to get to any rich veins. They kind of depleted whatever they could. At the same time that's happening, like I said, you have before that even individuals that would kind of just up and disappearing. No one knows where they went, stuff like that. And lately, since that's happened, basically all of the water sources that's been happening, all of the water sources that have fouled, right, in the town, right, all of the wells, right, they pull up water, and you could even implement it in a way that where it's like the water looks clean, it's not foggy, it's not anything, it's pretty unassuming, and maybe the mortality rate has gone down or rather gone up, and people are having a hard time staying alive in this town due to the fact that they can't drink the water. Every time they drink water, they're vomiting and sick, and it's not maintained well. So even though they're a town that manages to provide itself or sustain itself with its own means of acquiring fresh water, for some reason it can't. And so now the cost of water has gone way up because they have to get water traded in through merchants and stuff like that. You could also, use things like individuals who have been individuals who have been affected by the Aboleth, right? Affected by the Aboleth's telepathy, or they've become charmed by the Aboleth, and these individuals are, it's unnatural for them to be behaving, maybe aggressively, maybe they're behaving, maybe an individual who was boisterous and loud and charismatic is now very quiet and introverted and kind of sneaks off into the woods or whatever in the middle of the night for some unknown reason, right? I mean, even using the slimy, watery effects of the surfaces underground, if any of those buildings has basements in that town, maybe the tavern has a basement cellar kind of area where they keep the barrels of mead and fire water and salted meats, but they can't keep anything. Nothing's staying preserved because everything is just dripping wet and slimy, and you can imagine the smell and the stink that would come from that as well, right? That kind of perpetual precipitation, right? But either way, you can have that occur as you can have that be what's in motion, those kind of events being what's taking place as your adventurers show up. You can have, and then you can have a pretty simple hook there or thread to throw your players, right? I mean, you can have the townsfolk asking the players for their help, their assistance in solving the water problem. You can have the craftsmen or tradesmen requesting the aid of the heroes so that the heroes can, maybe they can do something to clear or clean up the cavern so that the quarrying can continue or mining operation can continue. You can have something that's a little more investigative, where the players now are maybe tailing one of these individuals who suddenly started behaving kind of oddly or out of character for who they are, stuff of that nature. Follow them along, and there's our beats right there. There's our kind of adventure beats that we can implement for our players, right? So, or you could have all three occurring at the same time, really, if you wanted to. But let's carry on. So we'll have the players. Let's say the players, presumably, they make their way through into the quarry. So it's all difficult terrain already. It's already all difficult terrain. That cuts speeds in half. So they got to move slow. And as they're moving slow, they make their way through. I think what would be pretty cool is if they're moving through this, let's use the cavern, the quarry cavern, because that's what we've established right now. They're making their way through this quarry cavern and stuff like that. You can present to them certain things. Maybe there's as they're making their way through, they're having a hard time keeping their torches lit because of all the moisture, right? So it's kind of dripping and not necessarily dousing the flame of their torch, but it's making it hard to keep a nice bright burn going on, right? As they look around, they can see this consistent moisture and precipitation on the floors and the wall. They're forced to move slow. Maybe as they go through the cavern, they hit a spot that opens up, and there's just kind of little pools of this water. It's kind of mucusy liquid, and in it there's just piles of insects, let's say, like your beetles or worms, stuff like that have drowned in this accumulation of liquid, and then in that instance there, you could even incorporate an encounter, right? Like you could incorporate a combat encounter with some form of like combat, like a combat encounter with some form of cave creature or something like that, like an onkeg or something, which we'll be getting to at some point in the future, near future. You could have like an Ankeg. You could have, I mean, they're at level 10. So, I mean, you could have a Aboleth come in and just, cause some trouble for the party. You could have even weird, odd things, right? Strange spectral creatures kind of coming around. You could have even something out of place. You could have a basilisk, though. A basilisk, why would a basilisk be in there? Well, that, maybe the basilisk resides there. Maybe who knows? Maybe the DM wanted to put a weird creature in there that seemed out of place and then decided to reason why it was there for their own specific campaign. What would make sense for them? Who knows? But either way, you could create you could create all sorts of stuff like that. Any sort of cavernous creature you could use, dark mantles. You could use ropers. There's a lot that you could use here to have this first encounter on the map, right? Then as the party adventures further through and they make their way deeper and deeper into the cave or cavernous system, right? Now, the reason I'm using the cavernous system and stuff like that in a town that probably wants to like quarry something or something like that is because that's what the flavor text tells me, right? Is that Aboleths have underwater layers, but the underwater layers are underground underwater layers. So they don't really enjoy necessarily being exposed to the surface area or the surface or the sun, right? So they're kind of underground. So you would have them traverse underground for a little bit and you could change it up on them, right? You would change it up. They'd be expecting to see maybe some weird cursed item or maybe a mummy or maybe some lich or who knows, right? There's something here corrupting the environment and they're expecting to fight, let's say, a conventionally terrestrial creature in the way that the terrestrial creature is a creature that remains on your standard terrain, right? Which an Aboleth does not. But all the while your players are thinking, okay, we're going to have to fight this weird creature in this slippery cave. That's what we're going to have to worry about. Where the reality of the matter is if they make it to the Aboleth, they're going to be fighting a creature that's effectively just going to try to pull them into its lake or body of water so it can have the upper hand, right? Remember that Aboleths are not stupid. They're very, very intelligent, actually, and quite wise, even though not so much as they are intelligent, but they would have strategy and tactic, plus the inherited knowledge that they've acquired from all of their victims and all of their ancestors, right? So moving on, you can bring them further through this cavern after an encounter. I mean, a slippery cave or cavernous system, system of tunnels, underground tunnels, stuff like that. You can incorporate all sorts of stuff here. You can incorporate traps, you can incorporate slides, you can incorporate pits that lead to nowhere, or maybe pits that lead directly into the body of water, right? Like imagine the party is walking through the cavern and they reach a point where there's a steep descent, like a steep angle descent. And at the bottom of this descent, if they can see it, like if they have dark vision or anything like that, there's a hole, right? There's just a large hole at the end, but there's earth 5 feet or 10 feet over from the hole. So they would have to slide down and push off, to jump, like an athletics or acrobatics check to jump and avoid the hole and make it to the other side of the land, right? Or of the earth, so that they can continue down the path through the cavernous system. Well, maybe they fail one of those checks. What happens when they fail? They fall. Who knows? 10, 20, 50, 100, 120 feet? Maybe not so much, but they fall a distance and they kerplunk into this body of water and they're like, I don't know where the hell I am, what's going on, but I'm now suddenly in water. So now as they're getting their bearings, as they're trying to figure themselves out in terms of their space, their position in space, rather, they're now in the domain of this Aboleth, who has the upper hand because They're kind of bewildered at the moment. They just fallen a great distance. They slipped and failed to, make their way on. So they have no idea really as to what's going on. And you can get a surprise attack if you're a particularly cruel dungeon master, or you could have the Aboleth sit there knowingly and kind of not take the players seriously. So, the Aboleth is just presumptuous and is like, oh, welcome to my domain, inferior creatures, like stuff of that effect, right? But, either way, or you could even, going all the way back to that instance, you could even have them not see the slippery slope, right? I mean, if they have no torch, if their dark vision isn't far enough, they can't perceive the descent. So there's all sorts of ways that you can incorporate things that are not necessarily combat scenarios into this adventure, right? So it's all dependent on what your party prefers, right? What they like. But anyways, following along, you could even say they do succeed on making this jump, and they continue down further through the cavern. As they make their way down, maybe there's a chamber that opens up, right? In this cavernous space, there's a large chamber. And this large chamber is odd and awkward to be placed in underground and stuff, and nobody realizes, or nobody knows what's going on. But it's kind of almost Paleolithic or Neolithic, like a lot of stones kind of built up upon each other to make little houses or layers. There's like a shrine and an altar that maybe has the worship. That has a statue of the Aboleth there. You can just describe it with its 3 or 4 eyes and its kind of, fish-like appearance with fins and a large mouth and teeth like an anglerfish, stuff like that, right? And as they appear, they're kind of like, what is this place and stuff like that. And then here you have this little community of Flintstone houses that are inhabited by effectively like cultists, right? They would effectively be like the individuals who were charmed and brainwashed by the Aboleth, and they've made their way down here and created this kind of little society where they worship and exact the Aboleth's wishes for it, since it doesn't want to or can't be bothered to leave its lair and obtain the things that it wants to obtain, especially if it's on earth, like on the ground, on dry land, rather than in the water, right? So in which case you can have a social encounter situation where the players are being kind of coerced, or the brainwashed cultist type individuals are trying to convince the players to follow along and kind of worship the deity as well, because the Aboleth brings nothing but good things and nothing like that. Nothing bad happens to us. We are always blessed with the Aboleth within its sight and wisdom. The Aboleth sees all, it knows all, it speaks all, it is all, right? Very typical cult worship type stuff. And you can further that along. They can lead the party to the battle with the Aboleth, or to the Aboleth's chamber, which then can involve some combat. Might be a bit more challenging as there's combat now with the Aboleth and perhaps the Aboleth's followers, right? Or you could have them go through and say, oh, we should do this rite of passage on our own, right? And have the Aboleth appear like that as a villain, and they have to combat it. But there's a lot of interesting ways that you can go with using an Aboleth as a monster, or even the main antagonist of your campaign, or anything of that nature, right? And yeah, all throughout that time, you can have the Aboleth even prodding the minds of the party, right? Because as soon as it manages to break through that wall and get a telepathic connection and communication with another creature, it learns of its greatest desires, right? So if it learns of the creature's greatest desires, right, what it can do then is then create a phantasmal force or an image, right, that, or implant one in the creature's mind of something happening, which can actually, bait them into jumping into the water to get it or save a person. They can use it to convince the player that there's much more danger here than necessary, that there's much less. Maybe the Aboleth presents to them an idyllic scenario that it says it wants for the world or for the material plane, which could be true or a lie. Either way, chances are it's a lie, because an Aboleth is morally an evil creature. But, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of tinker and work with an Aboleth to use them as a villain, a lieutenant or captain villain, or as the big bad evil guy. If there's one thing that I don't think you can do with an Aboleth, to be quite honest with you, maybe later on down the lines, but that's, you can't use an Aboleth as a crony. The only way I could see that is maybe you have another villain or creature that has managed to tame an Aboleth and like rides the Aboleth into battle, because if an individual, like if somebody can tame and submit an Aboleth to their will like that, how powerful are they, right? But anyway, that's it for now. Thank you guys so much for checking out the podcast and today's episode. And, I'll be sure to upload a new episode for you guys pretty soon. Next episode, we're going into angels. Oh my. Starting with the Deva. Okay. Sounds good. Once again, I'm MaxMcCool. This has been DM Tools. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good day, folks.